What's up, Paddler's Pulse people? Welcome back to the Paddler's Pulse. My name is Greggy, and I am stoked to have you join us today at another episode of the Paddler's Pulse. Today's episode is an adventure. I'm going to call it that. I'm going to call it an adventure because it is truly, without a doubt, epic on so many levels. And it's, in fact, I'm going to give you guys a little taste. Here's a little clip of the episode.
And it's so big. It's double overhead with my canoe. And of course I hoolie and I cracked the ama on my head.
Ooh.
And I figured, and while it's upside down, I thought, why try to right it? Just swim in the damn boat in.
Ooh, what do you think of that, guys? Right? Man, you are going to love this one. Today, we get to hang out with this amazing woman who has done some phenomenal things on the water. And she's also done some phenomenal things off the water. I'm going to keep her a secret for right now because we're going to introduce her in the episode. But this is one that'll touch your soul and make you truly proud to be a paddler and an eco-warrior. Enjoy.
At the heart of every paddler beats a passion for water, competition, and conservation. This unique podcast aims to unite all the paddling styles and stories under one common heartbeat. This is the Paddler's Pulse.
So we're excited because today we have an opportunity to chat with an amazing human being who you first taught me about just a few years back, and I'm excited that we have her on. So tell me a little bit about how you found out about her and why you were wanting to bring her on the Paddler's Pulse.
Oh man, this is one of the most selfish podcasts I could ever be a part of because I want to talk to this person for my own reasons, and if I could share that with everyone else. A little backstory. I have always been enamored with paddling distances, exploring coastlines that you can't get to by car or by foot even. And I had this grand idea once of maybe paddling my hometown of San Diego on a surfboard or something. And then I got into canoeing, and then I was like, God, I could paddle even farther. And then my perception of what far meant was blown out of the water when I heard about somebody who was going to paddle as one of her many adventures from Seattle down to San Diego. And she was going to be arriving in San Diego, my hometown, to conclude this journey, multiple-month journey. And so we got a bunch of outrigger canoe teams together and paddlers, and we met up at the Surfrider Foundation Paddle Around the Pier for Clean Water, where she was going to make her finish. And I got to greet her there and basically just gush about, oh my God, you're the most amazing paddler in the world. And to this day, I've been following her and doing my own little adventures, which I emphasize little because compared to hers, they're small, but she's inspired me to kind of take on some journeys that I might not otherwise do. And I'm pretty sure talking to her will inspire you guys as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, without further ado.
Yeah, hold on. But before you go into like, we want to keep our guest a secret for a minute.
Okay.
But before you do that, I remember, again, her being some of the inspiration for one of your bigger paddles, which was kind of connecting a lot of the coastline of California, right?
Correct. For a while, I've wanted to paddle all of California, but I've been doing it piecemeal when the availability allows. And so I did a 3-day paddle from Santa Barbara down to Malibu. Mm-hmm. In fact, you were my land team.
Your chauffeur,
and I think that's
your
one of
land
the things
team,
we'll be talking about today is the importance of teams in these things.
Sure.
You and our good friend Roger.
Shout out to
Roger.
me.
Roger, thank you. You escorted me for 3 days, 100 miles, and I dedicated each of those days to different wonderful causes, much like this person has dedicated her efforts in paddling. So yeah, my little adventure was fun and inspired by this person. And I mentioned the Seattle to San Diego paddle that she did, but that's just one of many. And so we're going to talk about some of what she's done and why, and how she's able to do it. And one of the things that she proudly describes is she calls herself somebody who paddles slow, and how that's actually enabled her to do some of these adventurous things. So let's figure out what that means. Can I introduce her now, or should we do a little more
No, I think it's good.
Teasing?
So who's with us today, Clark?
Margo Pelligrino. I could not be more happy to introduce you. How you doing today?
Fine. How are you guys doing?
Amazing. We're so excited to have you on. You are self-proclaimed a stay-at-home mom that's not so good at staying at home, and your adventures definitely talk to that point. Tell us, if you could, a little bit about how you found paddling.
It's funny. It's kind of a long story, but not really that long. I mean, I my father was a water bug, and so we were always somehow doing something on the water, whether it was he was renting a motorboat and getting stuck on sandbars, or paddling in, that didn't, like, I tell you, it's amazing that I still love water. Right. After some of our adventures and misadventures. But, I really give him and my mother both all the credit for introducing me to water and getting me into, just paddling and swimming, and mostly swimming. It was not an option in my house to not know how to swim. I mean, that was an important life skill. And of course, when I was younger, when I was 12, we moved from a wonderful little neighborhood in South Jersey to another wonderful town. And what it lacked in community, it had in natural resources. And so I grew up on a lake when I was 12 until the time I went to college. And I always just paddled about in an aluminum canoe. And it wasn't until we had a lot of funny things kind of culminated all at once to bump it up a notch from paddling around in a canoe and exploring in my lake and my waterways via aluminum canoe to,
what was
paddling
that first
out
lake?
The ocean.
Like where you grew up, what was the first lake that you learned to paddle in?
Centennial Lake
cool.
in Medford. And it's in sort of south central Jersey. So I've also, spent a lot of time at the shore because that's just a favorite family place. But it wasn't until my father died in 2004 suddenly, and then 2 weeks later, and part of my grieving process was to go out and paddle and just, be out under the stars and I was doing like laps on the lake. I got really into doing laps on the lake, and just using that time to contemplate. And then after he died, 2 weeks after he died, we had the 1,000-year storm, and we had multiple dam failures around the state. So I was forced out of my little comfort zone on the lake into exploring other waterways. And then also, my husband picked up this horrible kayak, and I was out on the ocean, and I just thought, it reconnected me with the ocean in a way that I hadn't been connected since I was, say, maybe like 10 or 11. So from there, it went into, I hooked up with a friend who pointed me towards another friend who paddled outrigger canoe, and they paddled with this guy, Drew, paddled with the Philadelphia Outrigger Canoe Club. So I got hooked into that. And that was when I started really thinking about long journeys. It was almost like a really weird way almost to grieve. My father, who was my best friend other than my husband, my dad was my best friend. It was an evolution more than an overnight thing,
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that, by the way. The evolution itself led you to do some pretty amazing journeys. Like, tell us why you got into that kind of journey process, like that, putting these big bucket list items, I would call them bucket list items. You know, they're pretty big for a lot of people to even dream up.
Let's even talk about what those are real quick. I don't even know all of your resume. Let's hear it.
How I got into like paddling long journeys, because I always hated turning around and going over my tracks again. I like circles rather than out and back.
Right.
Like I'll always take the circumnavigation rather than out and back, sometimes out on the ocean, just because the conditions can be so variable. So that's not a bad thing to do an out and back. But I think like after my father died, which, like I said, was very, very sudden, it made me realize it really drove home that the fact that we're so finite, like our lifespans, we're just, it's so temporary. And, what is important. And at his memorial service, there must have been over 300 people at his memorial service, all these people that he had helped in one way or another. And I thought that's like the biggest gift, is to be able to help people. I think it's a gift, and it's something that, I thought that he gave so much. And, it's just kind of, that was like a recurring theme actually in our family. I have very, very giving parents, both of my parents, really, my mom too. is always there to help. And it's like a life of service. So I thought, I somehow, and my dad had such a huge heart, and I figured I have to somehow continue that energy. He was a big believer in science, and E equals MC squared. So that energy has to go somewhere. So I have to take his energy that's no longer in his body. I had to take that cosmic energy, so to speak, and continue working with it and doing as much as I can to help the most amount of people. It really was that, then I was going through, I knew then that I wanted to go from A to B and make a big stink about some cause, something that would help as many people as possible. I kept thinking, what is the single best way to help as many people as possible? And I thought, the ocean, and my dad being such an ocean lover, I kind of came full circle. The ocean, if we let the ocean fail, we're seriously screwed, for lack of a better way to
very true.
Yeah, very true.
We really are screwed.
Tell me more about your perspective on that from more of a kind of 30,000 foot philosophical view. To somebody who's just now hearing how important, and I know that our Paddler's Pulse people are probably pretty passionate about the ocean as well. That's a lot of P's.
A lot of P's there. That's an alliteration.
Our Paddler Pulse people are passionate about protecting our places of paddling.
Probably.
Anyway, but it's so true. And just in one sentence or two sentences, how do you describe that to somebody? How do you like meet somebody in line at Starbucks and say, hey, did you know why the ocean's so important to our survival as a race? What is the answer?
Yeah. And it's funny. And I figured, rather than one-on-one type dialogues about why the ocean is so, because, and I never stop. And I do have those little discussions. I always find a way to talk to people I don't know and, bring in something, I love people, and I love to find out, I love to pick their brains. And so, but it only goes so far. So hence, these long paddles, I thought if I could get enough press and attention and get the folks, work with the folks on the ground, like the different organizations, like the East Coast, at the time, the first paddle was Miami to Maine, and the East Coast chapters of Surfrider Foundation are just, awesome, amazing grassroots activists. And they're very dialed into their waterways and their water. And then, there's also the coast keepers, and you can go on and on with all these different little grassroots organizations. And I thought, wouldn't it be so super cool? And along with the big organizations, right? You need the guys who are working locally, but you also need the people who are working on policy. And you really do need to bring them all together because, we're not in our individual silos. We are really a web of light. And so I thought, I was going to start doing a campaign for the ocean, because to save the ocean is, in my mind, the best thing that you can do to save the maximum amount of people. Because, you can work on cancer causes, which are, that's a huge thing. But then when you even look at that, you wonder how much does our environment play into that? So it was really, I figured let's get to the crux of it. Let's start out taking care of our ocean, because if you focus on the ocean and take care of what's going, you don't want pollutants going in there. You don't want plastics going in there. Climate change is a huge issue. All of these things, if you focus on taking care of the ocean and really have that in your heart, believe it or not, a lot of these other issues are going to resolve themselves, because the problems of the ocean are the problems that people are seeing everywhere in every waterway and on land.
Yeah,
it's so interconnected. So, that's when I partnered with National Environmental Trust in 2007 and went from Miami to Maine. It was like an 11-week journey, but I had a week off. And the whole idea of support, because originally it wasn't going to be a self-support. It was going to be a self-supported journey, and I had organized it with stops already in my head. And this is where the slow part comes in, because, you're not cranking it out at race pace every day, because you just can't do that. You have to pace yourself, because you're doing this every single day. You're paddling around anywhere from 30 to 40 miles. I know I built in as quasi days off, some 10-mile days and stuff. But you're doing some pretty big mileage. And when you're doing race pace, it is really easy to pull something, do something stupid, And besides, it's just a pace that, I mean, maybe I know some people could do it. I'm not one of those. I need the slow burn. But, and then, it was wonderful too, because after that, Miami to Maine, which I was so lucky, National Environmental Trust, which is now part of Pew, they really seized on this idea of a paddling campaign for the ocean. And they had specific issues they were focused on, which were slightly different than Surfrider, because NET wanted to talk more about fisheries. And it was really an interesting dynamic, but it worked because you had a big organization that was extremely, extremely well funded and based in DC, and they had Surfrider with all its grassroots organizations, but they were, of varying media savviness, So, but it was really pretty powerful.
It sounds like a lot of support and some channels that really help spread that message that you were hoping, which has kind of been, it sounds like it's your driving force, this idea that our oceans have such a massive impact on the planet and on us as human beings, especially from an environmental standpoint. And I'm with you on that. The environment that we live in causes or uncauses a lot of disease and things like that. And so maintaining that and you just kind of operating as a whole ecosystem is important. So I'm gonna ask again, what exactly are one or two things that you can directly relate to the ocean that somebody listening can go, oh wow, this one thing affects me as a human being. This one thing about the ocean affects me as a human being. What's like one thing that's just kind of really
oxygen.
Okay, perfect. Why?
And I mean, no matter how far inland you are, your body still requires oxygen.
Right.
And 1/3 to 1/2 of all of our oxygen is coming from the phytoplankton in the ocean.
Excellent. So we need to keep them alive, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And right now, it's being clogged up by plastics, and it's just really. I'll tell you, that's a scary thing, and we don't know. I don't know if we really know what's going to happen to the ocean with everything that we're doing to it. Between climate change, because the warming temperatures are also really harmful.
Yeah, I know that oceans are warming at a rate that's probably very different than what it has been the past 50 or 150 years, and that's causing some coral decline. It's causing some bad blooms of phytoplankton and algae and things like that are then suffocating other ones.
Yeah, and then you toss in the plastics in the mix.
Sure.
And still, so much of the world depends on seafood as a major protein source.
Sure. Yeah, it's massive.
So, yeah. And I mean, even looking at the piracy that you're seeing in the Indian Ocean, a lot of that is coming about because of fisheries collapsing. Now you have fishermen who don't have, their catch.
Yeah, I mean, there's a specific way of life that they're used to living in now. It's very threatened by, what we're doing as humans on land, basically, that's affecting those fisheries.
Yeah.
It's very tight in. One thing that I'm thinking about right now is, Clark and I love coffee, right? And I think that a lot of people can agree with this. One thing that I've learned from Clark, that I'm grateful for is that he has the ability to get like specifically pissed off at a coffee place when they have plastic stir sticks, and he will make a point to stand near me and wait till I'm done with mine to share it. All the way down, right? Am I right? Also, he cannot stand single plastic or single sugar containers because of the little amounts of trash. He looks around thinking to himself, why do people not just put sugar in a canister like that we can just pour out of? So I mention that because it's near and dear to it. It's something that I noticed about him right away that he taught me without probably even realizing that he was teaching me. But single-use plastics, I mean, that's a huge contributor to ocean environment. Tell me what your thoughts are on that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I totally agree. And, I've got my little coffee cup, and unfortunately right now I know one strong activist with 5 gyres, and
oh, wow.
Marcus, and he doesn't even have, I have a plastic case around my Apple, I have to say. I'm sorry to say, and some, other. I mean, I try to minimize where I can, like especially with grocery bags, reusable cups, and stuff like that. But it really is. It is problematic, and it's hugely problematic too. Not just in the pollution issues and where it's showing up, even in our food chain, which is also really bad because it's not just that the plastic is showing up in the food chain, but plastic particles adsorb contaminants.
Mm-hmm. So they concentrate them, right?
Yeah. So it's really, really, really bad stuff. But then also it's manufactured out of petroleum products.
Right.
And the thing is, I don't know if you guys have you ever seen that movie? It's a Wonderful World, I think it is, or that's the Christmas show, right? With what's his face and the little. Do you remember? Now I don't know the character's name, all right, but you got George who was trying to save the savings and loan bank, and then there was his friend. They did like that donkey thing, that donkey noise. Well, his friend, remember, wanted him to invest in his company. Do you remember what his company was?
No, what was it?
You've got to go back and watch it. It'll blow your mind. Because, like, when did this movie come out? When did that movie come out?
Oh, 40s? 50s,
40s, yeah.
Well, he was talking about plastics made from soy.
Oh, how funny.
And that was the company. And it's like, holy mackerel, It was just
fish
crazy.
pun.
It's like, why don't we do that? Because even though soy is, it's GMO a lot, but soy is a good crop to fix nitrogen in soil. So
Absolutely.
Growing it actually fertilizes your crops. People used to rotate all the time with soy.
Yep, they would
and then
bump
you make plastics out of it. Why don't we do that anymore? And, and do we really, and maybe people might say, well, we use too many plastics. Well, maybe we should look at better ways to either recycle them or maybe actually use less and encourage more bulk buying. So you don't have to, you instead of buying my pet peeve is shampoo.
What's that? What it?
Like,
shampoo?
why can't we have huge, jugs of shampoo that you go and fill up your container so you don't have to keep buying plastic? That's crazy. I hate
the same way we buy nuts and almonds and stuff in bulk bins. We should just have a bulk shampoo dispenser.
There are places that do that. I've seen those. One of them's in the town I live in called Blue Dot Refill. So one thing I want to kind of talk about is, as a paddler, everyone listening to this is generally going to be a paddler. We care. Are there some easy things? And then I want to actually talk about some of the paddling too. But as a paddler, what are some things that we can do that's probably super easy that maybe we have not paid attention to that you've come across?
Yeah, well, right out of the gate, using reusable water bottles. Whether it's stainless steel or even your Camelback, using that and getting used to those rather than using plastic bottles. That's an easy thing because, by the way, no one's. The danger, at least your tap water, unless you're on well like I am, and so it's up to us to test our well every now and then. The water that you buy in a water bottle is not even regulated. So there's no standards for that.
Right. I've seen some tests that show the pH levels of those vary across the board.
Yeah.
You mentioned the water bottles, and something that I'm gonna put a challenge out to all race directors. I just saw something really great at a race I went to in Southern California, where instead of throwaway plastic water bottles, they were giving water bottles away by a host sponsor with their logo on it, and then they had a refill station there. And I've seen this up in San Francisco at a race where they had a water fill station where you could bring your own bottles. But my challenge to all race coordinators and event directors for paddlers is, let's not bring single-use plastic water bottles anymore. The responsibility is on you to provide something that every paddler, maybe as a part of their registration fee, gets a water bottle with the logo on it so they get some branding. And all those hundreds of water bottles from every event spanned across the country aren't needed anymore. So take that.
Take that. I think as the entrepreneur-minded people that are race directors and put on these events, I'm a runner, so you go to a running race and you see those little water fill stations and those cups everywhere. It's something that we could do that make a little bit of a difference. I swapped over from the water bottle world a few years back to went into the Hydro Flask world. Shout out to Hydro Flask and all the companies like them. But, it's interesting. You can walk around with it kind of as a badge of honor, knowing that you're like doing something different. But it did take a while to get used to. Once you get used to it, though, it's part of your normal routine. It's your life. You know to carry it with you. You know to take it with you. We put coffee in it, things like that too. So that's a really good point.
So Margo, I gotta say,
yeah,
you've been spreading this message on some paddles. Where are some of these areas that you've been paddling from and to with this message? Tell us about where you've gone and the distances covered. You mentioned Miami to Maine. How far is that? How long did it take you? And how did that even take place? And then the one I got to see you finish, the Seattle to San Diego. Talk to us about these adventures.
I'm just laughing because, like, Miami to Maine was done in complete ignorance of what I was getting into. I mean, not total, because, like, I would paddle in pretty gnarly conditions because I figured that I needed to for training. But that was a 2,000-mile paddle. That took 11 weeks, but I had a week off to go to D.C. because National Environmental Trust wanted me to meet up with and talk to the Ocean Caucus. At the time, that was a subcommittee in the Committee of the Natural Resources Committee of Congress in the House. So, and I was really lucky too at the time because my congressman, Jim Saxton, was a huge supporter of national ocean policy back when it was legislation called Oceans 21, which wasn't even the focus of the Miami to Maine paddle, but I kind of latched onto it because I thought it's a really good idea. That was 2,000 miles, and I was lucky because for most of it in the south until New Jersey, I could be on the Intercoastal Waterway, and of course also part of South Carolina.
So,
then the following
real quick,
year,
Margo, could you repeat that number? How many miles was that?
It's about 2,000 from Miami to yeah, that was the longest one.
Holy
from
my
Miami
goodness!
To,
okay, so Miami to Maine. 2,000 miles. I think some people listening to this haven't even flown that far or driven that far. I mean, wow.
And you decided to go north. Why was that?
I figured I would start in the spring and then just work my way into warmer water and warmer air temps as the summer progressed.
Great move.
Okay.
What was the time frame?
2 months, you said?
It was pretty good. I was glad I did that, even though, people kept saying, well, you're going uphill. I mean, I wouldn't have noticed. I mean, because tides are, yeah.
And what are you paddling at this time?
The outrigger canoe.
What was it? What kind of canoe was it?
It was a Fuse. I still have it, and a friend of mine loaned it to me. He's a distributor for Outrigger Connection. He was. And he loaned it to me, and then in Maine, he came out and gave it to me, that was Eric McNett with Outrigger Connection. And now he is he sells Epic kayaks.
Oh, another Epic guy.
Awesome.
Yeah, we know a few Epic people.
We do.
Not to mention Epic is an acronym for
Every Paddler in California, the company we started.
Oh, that's fun.
So, love that word. We use it every sentence we can.
Yeah, and also we're big fans of the Outrigger Connection canoes. Clark and I both own one.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. That's fantastic. Yeah, now I have a Pueo too. So, and I'll tell you, Eric McNett is awesome with boat repair because I had a stupid incident where my boat got broken. So he put the bow back on of my my canoe, and it's very seaworthy to this day. And I have to also say a big, huge shout out while I'm talking about supporters to Kealoha paddles, because Kealoha they have been behind me since the beginning. They've been with me and hanging with me and giving me paddles and supporting me since 2007.
That's
been
awesome.
Having their backing has just been everything. They are phenomenal people. They totally get the bigger picture. They all understand the world would be a better place if more people could just get out and paddle. So they've been huge. And they actually, so it was kind of funny. So I did the Miami to Maine in 2007. In 2008, I partnered with NRDC on a very specific campaign for national ocean policy or some kind of legislation where we have everything under, where ocean conservation has a huge umbrella and you have policy that would reflect the importance of taking care of the ocean. So they were big pushers of that. So that's when I paddled LBI and then went up north and into the Raritan Bay and the Delaware Raritan Canal.
Long Beach Island, for those of you not familiar with LBI, is Long Beach Island, right?
Yes. that's Long Beach Island. Yeah, that's so. Yeah, it's a very long island. It's a very long barrier island in New Jersey, and so I actually paddled north around Sandy Hook and then came down because we were hitting all the different legislative districts.
Interesting.
Yeah,
that's awesome. And that was in 2008.
That was 2008, and then I partnered, and I think that was like somewhere between 300 and 500 miles. That was only about 2 weeks.
Okay.
It was a very funny journey.
Well, that's all. Just 500 miles. No big deal. What a great way to spend 2 weeks.
So, in addition to 2,000-mile journey so far, and then you kind of glossed over another number that I want to revisit, between 30 and 60 miles a day. Now, a quick story I got to share is I did a paddle that I was referring to with Greg, with a friend of ours, and around mile 25, my friend Cody, Sylvester, who's a fantastic paddler and friend, shout out, hi Cody.
Hi Cody.
He darted off to the side, and then he was gone. Like he saw something he needed to go catch up to. And this is pretty far into a paddle. It was 7 hours in, we were hot. And he came back, I thought I saw a turtle. And there was no turtles where we were paddling. There was no chance of seeing a turtle, but his mind was just like, I'm going to go find that turtle. I just think I saw it. So we started joking about, that's mile 30 talking. What does mile 60 talking sound like? Because that's twice as far in one day. And I am thinking you're in the saddle for 14 hours in a one-man canoe by yourself. You've got to be hearing voices. Tell us a little bit about what you battle out there when you're out there for so many hours by yourself, lonely, thinking, not thinking. Walk us through those adventure moments.
It is kind of funny because it really depends on the day and the conditions where you're, if the conditions are lively, if you have lots of bends in the coastline that kind of spark your interest, if you're moving at a decent pace, those miles go by and those hours go by pretty quickly. I mean, somehow my brain just occupies itself. It could be my OCD. Whatever you call it. I just always am thinking about something, the ocean, the world's problems, and blah blah blah. But there sometimes are excruciating times. Like I'll never forget on the West Coast where I was paddling into Fort Bragg, and it was, for whatever reason, the current was just a flog. It was kind of foggy, and the ocean was flatter than flat. It was so excruciatingly dull. There was like nothing. There was nothing going on. It was just probably the most boring day out of the ocean. I honestly couldn't believe it. And and it was excruciating because it was so flat and so gray, and it was and then also in the back of your mind you're like, well, I really want to be in land. I want to make landfall soon because I don't want to be out on the ocean in the dark on the Pacific. That was always my goal. I would do it if I had to, but I would rather do night paddling on the inside than on the outside. That's where all those big scary things come out. And so it was, that was the one time that, you're just trying to do anything, like turn on your marine radio, your VHF, and hear that monotonous weather report over and over and over again. That was even something to listen.
Right, just to kind of break up the monotony.
Yeah.
Now, you had to have been, you kind of know where you are. You've got locations at each of these stops. You've got your milestones you're looking to hit before it gets dark. Walk us through some of the scary moments you had out there. I imagine you had to be feeling pretty, the big fish, the big swell, the big storm, all these things that people talk about making us a little fearful of paddling sometimes. You were dealing with it on a regular basis, and then you had your own psyche out there to make something look a little more dramatic than maybe it even was.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Because your mind can play tricks, and especially in the fog, everything seems bigger in the fog. And, it is, I'm glad I had the East Coast experience first and then some of the other experiences because they were like training to me for the West Coast. The West Coast was probably the biggest mental challenge.
Why was
that? Interesting. Why is that?
Because you're truly alone, especially in the Pacific Northwest. You are alone. There's there's really, if something goes wrong, you have to know how to get in yourself, because you really cannot expect the Coast Guard to find you always. And also the stations are few and far between. Sometimes they can't always get out. The Pacific Northwest was pretty rugged. And, my first day was such a teaser day when I rounded that bend out of the Straits of Juan de Fuca. It was sunny. There was a mild heat wave. It was gorgeous. There was a lot of wind, but it was at my back. And, once you round once you go by that Tatoosh Island and angle in, you're in this really protective cove that I kind of called, like Hanalei, but colder. and it's also like, I'll tell you, it's the sweetest surf spot ever. It really is a sweet
Good tip.
spot.
Noted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Macaw Nation, Hoboken Beach. And, there was that beautiful day. And then after that, it was fog, a lot of fog. And especially once you're, the West, I'll tell you, it was just gnarly. You've got big stuff, like 7 to 9 was like my average day almost along the coast of Washington once I got out around the Westport area, Washington. And that was probably the scariest time was, it was a 4 to 7 day that was going to kick up to 7 to 9, but it was the best day of a string of days. And I had already stayed with this retired fisherman for 3 days. And it was like, this was the best day. I have to go today. And, cause it's only going to get worse. And it was still bad enough that up in Oregon and Washington, the Coast Guard have control over who goes in and out of the bars, the harbor entrances, because they can get really rough. So sometimes they close the harbor entrances because it is so rough, and sometimes they'll restrict them to certain vessels. Well, Westport, I wanted to leave that day. It was 4 to 7. They actually had the harbor entrance closed, so I had to launch my canoe off the beach.
Wow.
Yeah, it was nuts. And it was just, and up until that point, I was being a complete bonehead with my gear. And June Bernard, fortunately, we did have those days off. She's like, you are going to get a wetsuit. I don't care what you say, you're getting a wetsuit. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to spend the money, right? Because it's really self-funded, right? And I'm my poor husband. I don't work. And so I thought, and she's like, look, if you die, it's going to be even more expensive. So like, all right, that
way. What a way to frame that for you to say yes. I love it.
And I'll tell you, June was awesome. She is, she's a great friend. She is just rock star awesome. So we got a wetsuit, and I'm so glad because that day was the day I ended up swimming the canoe in. And I had to, it was an unbelievable day. I mean, it was 4 to 7 starting out, and then the wind, like you could at that point start setting your clock by the wind. It starts blowing at like 20 out of the north at 10 o'clock, and it just was howling. And the fisherman that I was staying with had told me, and he's also an outrigger paddler, and I'm totally blanking on his name right now. Really, really neat guy. So he said, you got to watch out for Willapa Bay because the sandbars are 10 miles out, and they, and it's horrible. Crazy. It's really treacherous. So you have to be 10 miles out. Well, I didn't put that into my GPS. And I guessed I was only about 8 miles out. And because of the fog, which is really weird that you would have this wind with this fog, but because usually when you have a real windy day, you don't have fog, but it was nuts, and you had fog. So I'm going now in breakers, and I had to just watch where they were constantly because I'm in the worst part of the inlet, and just, and they're huge. They're just huge because by then it's like 7 to 9, and the breakers are double that because they're breakers, and it was nauseating, and I really just had to focus, and I saw a fishing boat, and I thought, please don't move because you're my line, and it was incredible, and I was able to get through that mess, and then. And it was just constantly focusing and constantly paddling and watching where a wave would pop up all of a sudden that could break your boat. And then once I got out of that area, I'll tell you, it was flat compared to that. I felt like
everything after that's probably flat. I can't believe you were 8 miles off the coastline and having waves breaking on sandbars. Wow. Usually I would think I'm going to be paddling close to shore. In case something happens, I'll be closer to shore. But you're having to go 8 miles out and still facing all that. Wow.
It was insane. And because the way the continental shelf is there, you can't be, especially on the coast of Oregon too, you can't be too close to shore because of the continental shelf is only a quarter mile out. And so it is really rough. So you have to be out a little bit. And it was such a mess. And then I had to land, and I knew there was no way. That was the day I was anticipating crossing over the Columbia River mouth. But with wind like that and conditions like that, there was no way I was going to cross that river mouth, because that inlet would have been nothing compared to what the Columbia River mouth was going to be like. Because that's huge. It gets super huge. So I ended up figuring out and of course it all looks shitty at this point. Once I get to where I think I want to land, which is right around, it was Ilwaco, Washington. I mean, it was shitty. And I'm looking for rips. I'm looking for anything that looks like a cove. There's nothing. It's a straight beach. It was just shit. So I figured, well, I just have to pick a spot and go in, and hopefully I can stay on my boat. But of course, I go in, and it's so big. It's double overhead with my canoe. And of course I hoolie, and I crack the ama on my head.
Ooh.
And I figured, and while it's upside down, I thought, why try to right it? Just swim the damn boat in. So I just grabbed the yakos and swam it upside down.
Where is this at that this happened? We're looking at a map as we're talking to you, trying to paint a little picture. What was the place where you hoolied and cracked the arm over your head?
Ilwaco, Washington. That's right above Cape Disappointment.
Oh, that sounds very disappointing.
Oh, it was. And it was, I'm going to tell you, I was very happy that I could get the boat out of the water all by myself. But also my gear had come undone. And so I had gear I had to go collect, and some stuff I lost. But it was just, it was a shit show coming in. And
what was
then
the water
poor
temp
June,
there?
the funniest thing, she picked me up and she's like, Margo, we have no place to stay. And I said, you know what? I'm really not worried about it. And she's like, no, you don't understand. We don't even have a place to pitch our tent. And I said, you know what? I don't know why, but I'm really not worried about it.
It's amazing how the world seems a little more easier when you're on dry land. You're like, all the rest of that stuff doesn't matter.
I'm not going to die now. Exactly.
Yeah.
And the funniest thing, there was this guy, this was such a crack up. I noticed on this beach, people would be driving by and their dogs would be running next to them, right? That's how they walk their dogs. They would drive on the beach.
Oh man. Okay, this is by far one of my. This is just really exciting. Clark's eyes are lighting up like a kid at Christmas, by the way.
Yeah, so one of the good things you do is you document via blogs all these adventures that you've done, and future adventures I'm sure you will too, where you land and you write and then you post. And I remember reading this blog and following you down the coastline to me, because I just told myself you were paddling right to my home waters. I couldn't wait to see you. But that Columbia River mouth, I remember they wouldn't even let you go there. They were pleading with you to wait a day or two because they didn't want to do a rescue. And so you actually had to delay because the current was so strong, they had guaranteed you would get sucked out to sea.
Yeah, it was really bad. There was I really had to wait for it to settle down too. Cause the waves, they're huge. And when you have crashing waves and that kind of incredible, I mean, first of all, you've got the current, even when you're going with an incoming tide, you still have the downward current from the river. So even though I planned it when I finally was able to cross over, and I'll tell you what worked out wonderfully was we did actually get picked up. Some people walking their dogs said, hey, what are you doing? And June and I were telling them what we were doing. And June, of course, is driving this Ford. We had this donation of the use of a Ford Mini Transit. People kept asking her, do you work for Ford? And she's like, oh, no, well, not really. I'm doing this crazy adventure. And so this couple picked us up right off the beach and invited us to come back to their house, and they made us dinner. Oh, wow. They had already eaten. They made us dinner. They got a bottle of wine from a neighbor's, and they were fantastic. And then we drove that was when the gorge race was going on. So I finally got, to meet the Kealoha folks.
Oh, wow.
And, which was absolutely fantastic. And, Megan is just absolutely fantastic. Meg is fantastic. And got to meet them, and we got the ama repaired. And not only did we get the ama repaired, but the Kamano Composite guys, because they loaned me the boat, believe it or not. They trusted me and loaned me the boat, which it's like, that boat really took a beating, let me tell you. And, but it withstood it all. And they gave me a spare ama, but we did have to wait a couple days for it to settle down. But even though it was settled down, I've never been on swells that huge. I was kind of going over, I was kind of a little close to Peacock Point. I felt like an ant on a waterbed is the only way I could describe it. It was just like, they were just like, like these big, giant, like the size of a 2-story house swells. And but they were gentle and rolling. I mean, it was like being an ant on a waterbed. It was insane. And I ran into this fisherman who I thought was going to run me over, but he's like, you're out here all alone? I said, yeah. He goes, oh, do you want to ride? I'm like, no, I'm going to the other side. He goes, where are you landing? I said, the beach on the south side. He goes, that's a surfing beach. I said, yeah, I'll surf in.
What was the name of that beach?
You know what? I totally am blanking on that name. But if you look at Google Earth, beach. You'll see that beach. You'll see it right after that South Jetty. And he was awesome. This guy hung with me until I got to the North Jetty. And I was surprised because I'm going 1.5 miles an hour. And I'm giving it as much as I could. And I said, I thought I was going to have an incoming tide and that this would be easier because you're kind of going northwest to southeast when you're crossing just the jetty, from jetty to jetty. And he goes, yeah, but you're still going against the current of the river.
Current, yeah.
So
the outgoing flow, right? Yeah.
And that current is AMA side, right? So outrigger canoes, the outrigger is always on the left. So you're constantly having to watch your AMA with all this gear, with this cold water, with 30 miles under your belt, and the AMA is exposed to this current pushing you out to sea.
Yeah.
Boy, this sounds fun.
It was really pretty. It was pretty intense. And this guy was so nice. He's like, you don't have anyone escorting you? I said, no. He goes, well, you do now.
That's fantastic.
It was incredible. I had the 75-footer, fishing vessel with me. It was really funny. And then I did surf in. I caught the sweetest wave. It was like one of the highlight landings of the whole journey. I got the wave at the perfect spot. I could see the curl as I'm just like riding in right alongside it. It was intense. It was just perfect. It was just the most amazing. I'll never forget looking to my left and seeing the wave curling, and I'm just like riding right with it. It was just incredible.
That sounds like the perfect welcome back to shore after all that work.
Yeah.
So you're surfing an OC1 here, which I bet a lot of people are not too comfortable surfing one-man canoes. Had you surfed your canoe before this journey, or was this kind of a learn as you go?
It was definitely learn as you go. I mean, I've surfed my canoe, but only in short wind swell on bays and in the ocean. And so I hadn't really, I've never been in some of the big swell that I was in, like especially Oregon. I mean, it was just, you can't, like I was worried a couple times that I would pitch pole, so I had to go down at an angle. I mean, the points, whenever you come to a jut of land in Oregon, it gets, you wouldn't believe how ugly it gets. I mean, I realized I had post-traumatic stress disorder from that when I got to California, and I would start like seeing a point in California and I'd be like preparing for the worst. And I'm just okay. And the points in California were reversed. It was fine. In fact, they were perfect. But Oregon was just so gnarly. I mean, I actually got washed off. There was one, and this was the one thing that was really cool. Northern Oregon, the harbor mouths all have like a northwestish face. So they get ugly in a hurry. And I mean, there was one time when Newport called me, the Coast Guard said, you have to go back to, I was going into, where was it? Siuslaw in the Florence River. And they said, you have to go back to Newport because our harbor entrance is closed. And I had to land on the beach. But I didn't land on the beach because they were so concerned they came out and got me. Which was ridiculous because I really was fine landing on the beach. June had picked out a perfect spot. I was within, and I told them, I said, please, I'm really good. They're like, no, we want to come get you. And then I realized they want to come get me because they want to yell at me. And
Wow.
and this is in Oregon. Yeah. Oh, they were trying to close the whole thing down. It
That's
was just
amazing.
it was crazy. But they weren't really, they were all motorboat guys. They weren't used to self-propelled stuff. They weren't even they didn't even bike. Bicycle. They didn't do any self-propelled anything. So they couldn't really conceive of any of this. And they basically, they told me I needed to carry more sandwiches. I should have flares.
So
and
what?
My PFD was dingy.
What did you carry with you?
What did you have with you?
And how did you communicate with the land?
Like you and June, how did you guys like set up points to meet and things like that? Like what was that about?
Well, I had
There's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah. Well, I would do what I could do with Google Earth. And then June would have to go to those points that I picked out to see if they were actually as good in real life as they were on the satellite image from Google.
And then how would she
then-
let you know that? I mean, you're out at sea during this time or what?
Yeah. And
Oh,
so
wow.
I had my waterproof cell phone, and I also had, I had 2 VHFs. I had a regular marine radio that had, was for ship stuff. And then she and I also had our
Good move.
own little closed circuit VHF.
Oh, perfect.
One of the ones that, the little ones the kind you get 2 of. And so we were able to communicate through that. And, cause it was really, you had to have communication with your grounds person because sometimes things could change. And then
totally.
also So, but they brought me in, and of course they had to take my boat. Now, a Coast Guard, if they rescue you, usually your boat is now flotsam. So, but since it was on them, since they had initiated this, since it wasn't a rescue, since basically they wanted to pull me in, even, I did not call them. They took my boat, which was really, it was pretty good. It was funny because I'm walking down the gangplank, right? And the captain of the day, the commanding officer of that station, I hear him go, "Oh my God, you've got to be kidding me!" Because he's looking at my boat, and he couldn't believe that I was out there in that. It was really kind of funny.
Yeah,
but,
yeah, that's insane. So, real quick, I want to make sure I got that correctly. If they rescue your boat, they seize it and it becomes flotsam.
Well, they won't. They'll rescue you and just leave your boat out there.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
I've never even heard that word before. Flotsam.
That was
Flotsam
the
and
name of
Jetsam,
the
it's all that,
Flotsam and Jetsam. Flotsam and Jetsam from Little Mermaid, dude. That was the name of the eels.
I'll pay more attention.
You have kids. You should know Flotsam and Jetsam.
I will pay more attention.
Shout out to Flotsam and Jetsam. Okay, so we're moving. This is amazing. We're moving down the coastline, and Clark and I are physically like on Google Earth right now. Which I would recommend anybody listening to this if you're not driving and you're in front of a computer. Follow this story along because it's actually quite fun. So you're tipping into Oregon, or you're about halfway through Oregon.
California must just seem so tame after all.
Yeah, what was
that.
California like after you get past, probably like
Gold Beach
and stuff like that, and you get into like California? What do you first come up on? Crescent City, probably, or Klamath?
Yeah, it was Crescent City because Klamath I heard was too sharky, so we pushed on
Say that again. Klamath, you heard was too sharky.
Yes.
but 50 miles north, it's not. I get it. It's mindset anyway. So Crescent City.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And and I'll tell you. Did you mention Lance? Do you know Lance Mamia?
No.
Oh, he is. I hope you guys get a chance to meet him. He's a phenomenal outrigger paddler. He is really. Talk about team member, and his wife Kay and their kids. Bodie and Dylan are just like absolutely the best family. They were really, they were such a hoot. Lance paddled with me, for some of the stretch. Like, oh my God, the kickoff at Seattle was insane because we had dragon boats and outrigger canoes and,
what a great
single. It was nuts. And
what
Lance
a great send off.
Yeah. And oh my gosh, it was just absolutely incredible to meet so many people that I've only also communicated through Facebook. And Lance actually had paddled with me a little bit on Miami to Maine. I forget how he had heard about it, but he actually ended up coming out here, staying in my house, and then while my mom was babysitting and everything, and then meeting me up in Long Island and paddling a stretch with me. It was just an absolute, it was just awesome. It was just, because like for the most part you're alone, like it's a solo journey, and and it's nice to have company, but not everyone is, wants to paddle 30 miles or whatever. Right. And, he was totally game. He's a phenomenal paddler, so he had a good flow with me.
So did you meet him in Crescent City or?
No, not at Crescent City, but, yeah, he was mostly up but after, I'll tell you, it really did make me laugh, because no one wanted to tell me how scared they were for me crossing Columbia River mouth. And it wasn't until afterwards or right before they're like, we fly in planes going to Hawaii and you can see the swells.
Wow,
from the plane. Yeah, around the Columbia River. I mean, that was just gnarly. But
so Margo, one thing I hear people talk about a lot. I mean, your adventures are amazing. For somebody who's kind of not as adventurous as you, what do you tell them to inspire them to maybe push the envelope a little bit? Because I mean, you've done some pretty amazing things. It's all relative. Amazing is relative. So one person's adventure is another person's warm-up paddle. But to get somebody to push their own comfort zone, how do you inspire somebody to maybe look at themselves and be like, you can do more than you think you can? What's your advice to those people?
I actually wish I knew the thing that would instantly turn on that switch. But all I can do is tell people to, just try something different. And I always start one good way, pick easy ways to get out onto the water. And whether or not I know someone personally and I can get them on a board or my canoe or whatever, I always say, look at what's going on, like, especially like we just had International Surfing Day with Surfrider.
Yep.
So we get people to get out on the water that way. And any way that you can. And I always, there's so many clubs, so many paddling clubs. And, to me, I just can't hype up those paddling clubs and surf clubs enough. So, because there's so many people, there's so many ways to get your toe into it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're big proponents of all the different craft all being amazing and not having just a mindset that one is the only way to be out there. In fact, some conditions are more enjoyable on different craft. Have you spent time on other craft other than the outrigger canoe, or is the outrigger pretty much your bread and butter?
Well, that's or negative bread and butter. It's I also have stand-up paddle boards and surfboards, and one vessel I think is totally underrated is even your goofy aluminum canoe, just to get out there and go on some local waterways. But like, I think inflatable stand-up paddle boards are really awesome for places like New Jersey and for places that have smaller rivers that have lots of obstructions. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just,
you say that
they're so easy.
Just because they're easy to get around? Like, is that the whole...
Yeah, but like the inflatables also, it's easier to carry a repair patch for an inflatable than, all the epoxy and stuff if you ding your board, your hard board. But it's just, they're just so much more, to me, indestructible, and they're such an easy entryway just to get in the water, and you can lie down on them. You can, they're just great. They're just, cool. I love anything that's easy to get for people to get in water and fun.
Nice. So I want to kind of recap some of the paddles you've done. You've paddled from Miami, Florida to Maine. So you've done the eastern coast of the continental U.S. You've done the Gulf of Mexico. So you've done the southern portion. You've done Seattle to San Diego. So you've done the western coastal continental U.S. You've done rivers, perimeters of lakes. You've paddled around states like New Jersey. So Margo, you've paddled all these places. What's next for you?
I kind of was thinking something that I could do that wouldn't be, a built-in like media campaign for the ocean, just something that I would do just, for fun. And if people want to come along, that would be awesome. And I've kind of tossed it out there a little bit. I'd love to paddle all the rivers of New Jersey and then all the rivers of Alabama, because Alabama's rivers and the people that live there are really a huge asset. It's a really cool state. I mean, people think, Alabama, they have this snobby thing about the South, but, there's really some cool history. The people are great. I think that there's honestly, I think it would be so wonderful to have more people traveling around our country. I really do think great things happen in this country when you have people from one part of our country going to visit people from the other part, and people getting to know each other, and people realizing how many things we have in common. Like, all of my journeys, whenever I talk about water, I've never, politics can get you in all sorts of divisions. There's not one person who doesn't want clean water. I haven't found it yet, and I think that is a huge commonality that we can build on, that, we all need clean water, and the benefits of being in and on the water, which is to me something what Jay Nichols has been pushing too, and on the benefits of water and how best to sell the idea of water, because especially conservation minded, we're kind of losing that battle, but we need to bring people back to the water and get them in it, and however they can have an adventure on water is awesome. I mean, even if it's just a little day paddle, I mean, anytime you're outside and not on the sofa and in your house is an adventure. I mean, yeah, you can have an adventure while you're reading because you're reading about someone else's adventure, and your brain can go to these places, and your imagination is a huge source of entertainment as well. But to get out there and experience your own vulnerability as a person, and to really tap into yourself. And the other adventure, I'm working on a book as well. So that's a different kind of adventure. So that's something I must focus on because, I just got to do it. There's too many stories not to tell and not to share.
That's wonderful. Yeah,
I can't wait to read that myself. Well, Margo, as I mentioned in the beginning of this whole thing, this was the most selfish interview I could do because I am constantly inspired by what you're out there doing, I look at the map I've created of the paddles I've done, and I get this self-accomplished feeling of checking things off my list. Well, if I were to zoom out of my map 1,000 times and look at the paddles you've done, it's amazing. So the fact that you've paddled so far and for such great causes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for inspiring many and doing a lot of good. Pretty darn cool.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it's inspiring to me, just to add to what Clark said, to see that you realize the value in not doing it selfishly, that you realize the value in, kind of honoring the impact that, like you said, your father had in giving to others and being a beacon of light, or I guess I should say, yeah, just an inspiring point of a person holding a flag saying, hey guys, come in this direction, and then making that something so focused on, our oceans and our waterways, and being able to kind of hopefully shift. And I think that you have and you will continue to shift the direction of people's perspectives about things like keeping our oceans in good shape, because I heard an analogy about a fish tank. What is that?
Could you leave us with that analogy of you sent us a bio of yourself, and we'll be sure to post it on the podcast notes. But you talked about you were maintaining some fish tanks early on, and that was kind of your closed system analogy to what the ocean is. Could you share a little bit about that to close?
Yeah, and thanks for asking me about that. And also, thanks for having me on the show. It really, the honor is mine. I love sharing the journey and the thoughts. But the fish tank it's funny because before I had kids, I had all these fish in tanks, and not as many as some people can have. I had only 12, but I bred African Rift Lake cichlids, and they are really cool little fish. They all have different personalities. And but one thing that they all need is clean water, and you can kind of bend the rules. The rule is 1 inch of fish per gallon of tank, just to keep your fish healthy. But you can bend the rules and overpopulate your tanks if you are religious with your water changes, and you change out a little bit every day, or, do more frequent big changes where you're taking like 30% or 40% out. If you have a real emergency and you let it go too long, take out 50 to 70% of your water. It'll shock your fish, but, they do stay alive. And I realized, when I was thinking about the ocean, I thought, no one's going to change the water on the ocean. We have the hydrologic cycle, which is really, the filtration. We have evaporation, rain on land. It gets filtered through the land before it ends up in our waterways and in our ocean. And that whole cycle is, keeps things pretty clean, except that with impervious cover and more development and more people, we are kind of gumming up that purification system that's just naturally occurring. And so really that was what got me thinking that it's so easy. It's so easy to keep things happy and healthy, especially fish. You just keep their water clean. You give them their food, you give them what they need, but the clean water is mandatory. And the water that they have adapted to, like my water is naturally hard, higher pH, perfect for riff lake cichlids. So I didn't have to mess with my water. I didn't have to add chemicals or anything to have that naturally, what that water that they grew up with. So that was the other thing too, is like, we have a system that is set up for us. I mean, that's, it's set up for nature, and we are part of nature, and it works. It's our ecosystem is a self-sustaining thing. We're here, but we are doing things to kind of gum it up and make it not work or not work as well. And, if it gets sick, that was the other thing, the animal husbandry aspect of it. I crashed a tank. I had a lot of fish die, and because I wasn't keeping up with, after I had my kids, I wasn't keeping up with water changes as I should have been. And, it was a real hard, sad lesson. And I felt like we can't let this happen to our ocean. And we're kind of tipping the balance now. We're tipping the balance, and no one is going to bail out the ocean.
Right.
Yeah. And if we have a tank crash on a scale that big, there's no one to come in and set up a new tank, is there? And do a water change.
One tank.
Yeah, that's powerful. I'm so glad that you shared that story. I think it's a very easy one for people to kind of wrap their heads around about the importance. And thank you for being such a mission-driven person who wants to get out there and share these messages. It's an honor to have you on the podcast, and I know that people who are listening to this are going to be very inspired. Where can they learn more about you? Where can they find you? How can they connect with you?
They can go to my website, paddle4blue with the number 4blue.com, or they can email me at outrigger1, all spelled out, outriggerone @mac.com. But I think that contact information might actually be somewhere on the paddle4blue.com website.
Okay, that's awesome.
And also the folks at Blue Frontier Campaign, which is the organization I'm a project of. They have all their contact information on their website, which is bluefront.org. So that's another way to reach out to me.
Brilliant. I love it. Are you on social media? Can we see you there? Yeah. Cool. Yeah. How do we find you?
Slow Paddler on Twitter and One Slow Paddler on Instagram.
Got it.
And Facebook, the Big Apple to the Big Easy.
Oh, I love it.
To the most inspiring slow paddler I know, who owns it.
That's amazing. Thank you again so much for joining us. And I'm thinking that next time you're out in California, we should get together. I know Clark would love to do one of these epic runs with you.
Yeah. Hey, so we have a little tradition on the Paddler's Pulse. If you'll take us out, I don't know if you have anything you normally say at the end of a conversation, but we like to say we'll see you on the water. So if you would greet all our guests with one final goodbye and tell them that, we'll wrap it up.
Yes, definitely. Well, thank you guys. It was really an honor. And I have to tell you, I find you guys really inspiring because what your interest is and what you're doing and connecting paddlers to one another. And I hope I do see you on the water. I hope I see everyone on the water.
Right on.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for dropping by to listen in. You, yes you, are the great people that bring paddling to life. Join us next time, and please don't keep us a secret. Like us on iTunes, share with your buddies, and keep the Paddler's Pulse pumping. See you on the water.